Beneath an ordinary vape shop in Laredo, Texas, federal agents found a 25-foot tunnel that was used to smuggle drugs from Mexico into the U.S.
The DEA's latest discovery has flipped the entire cartel operation on its head. What looked like an innocent vape shop in Laredo, Texas, turned out to be the key to an $800 million underground smuggling ring. But this wasn't just about drugs. What they uncovered next will leave you terrified. Let's break it down. The Underground Empire. You're walking down a quiet street in Laredo, Texas, passing by colorful storefronts, maybe grabbing a vape from the local shop, completely unaware that 25 feet beneath your feet lies a sophisticated smuggling corridor that cost millions to construct. This isn't the plot of a Hollywood thriller. This is the reality of America's southern border in 2025, where Mexican drug cartels have engineered over 230 cross-border tunnels since 1990, transforming the underground into a hidden highway for drugs, cash, and human cargo worth billions of dollars. The scale of what's happening beneath our feet is staggering, almost unfathomable. We're not talking about crude dirt passages hastily dug by desperate criminals. No, these are engineered marvels, some equipped with ventilation systems sophisticated enough to sustain operations for hours, electrical lighting that could illuminate your entire home, and rail tracks capable of moving tons of contraband with industrial efficiency. These tunnels can cost anywhere from $1 to $5 million to construct, yet they promise returns in the tens of millions through drug payloads, with street prices for fentanyl alone exceeding $10,000 per kilogram. Let me take you back to where this underground war truly captured the public's imagination. Do you remember 2015? That was the year the world watched in disbelief as Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, one of the most notorious drug lords in history, escaped from Mexico's maximum security Altiplano prison. But here's what made his escape so audacious, so perfectly symbolic of the cartel's engineering prowess. He didn't break through walls or overpower guards. He walked out through a mile-long, fully ventilated tunnel equipped with a motorcycle on rails. That tunnel wasn't just an escape route, it was a declaration of capability, a testament to the resources and expertise these organizations command. But El Chapo's tunnel wasn't the beginning of this story. The history of narco tunnels stretches back much further, to the early 1990s, when border enforcement began tightening after NAFTA and increased patrols made surface-level smuggling increasingly risky. The very first documented cross-border smuggling tunnel was discovered on May 17, 1990 in Douglas, Arizona, a relatively simple 300-foot dirt passage used primarily for marijuana smuggling. It was rudimentary, almost primitive by today's standards, but it established a blueprint that would evolve dramatically over the next 3 decades. Fast forward to the 2000s, and we see a quantum leap in tunnel sophistication. This is when fully ventilated, well-lit tunnels with rail systems started appearing, particularly in the San Diego-Tijuana corridor, which would become ground zero for the most elaborate tunnel networks ever discovered. Why San Diego? Because the Otay Mesa district, with its vast warehouse complexes, allowing cartels to blend their illegal operations seamlessly into legitimate commercial activity. By 2012, authorities were discovering tunnels that defied imagination. We're talking about passages extending thousands of feet, some equipped with drainage systems, some with elevators, some with air conditioning. The longest tunnel ever discovered was found in January 2020 in San Diego, a mind-bending 4,309 feet, that's over 8/10 of a mile, stretching from Tijuana to Otay Mesa, complete with an elevator, drainage, and air conditioning. Think about that for a moment. Criminals built an underground passage longer than 12 football fields, complete with amenities you'd expect in a modern building, all while evading detection from the most sophisticated border security apparatus in the world. Now, here's where the story gets even more interesting and more concerning. In 2025, we're seeing a notable shift in tunnel characteristics. The tunnels are getting shorter on average, typically ranging from 100 to 3,000 feet, rather than those epic 4,000-foot passages of the past. But they're getting smarter. About 80% of tunnels discovered in 2025 feature ventilation systems and electrical installations, compared to maybe half that percentage a decade ago. Why the change? Because cartels have learned that smaller, more numerous tunnels spread across different locations are harder to detect, and if one is discovered, the loss is more manageable from a business perspective. And make no mistake, this is very much a business. A sophisticated, calculated, ruthlessly efficient business. According to the Drug Enforcement Administration's 2025 National Drug Threat Assessment, Mexican transnational criminal organizations generate between $20 and $50 billion annually from U.S. drug sales alone. That's not counting human smuggling, extortion, resource theft, or any of their diversified criminal enterprises. With that kind of revenue, spending a few million on a tunnel that might yield tens of millions in successful smuggling operations before being discovered is just smart business planning. Let me paint you a picture of what 2025 has looked like so far in terms of tunnel discovery discoveries because this year has been particularly revealing. Preliminary data from US Customs and Border Protection and Homeland Security investigations indicate at least 6 major tunnels have been uncovered year to date as of early October. That's roughly a 20% increase from 2024's pace. But what's driving this increase? Is it more tunnels being built, or are we just getting better at finding them? The answer is likely both. On one hand, cartels are intensifying their underground operations in response to heightened surface-level enforcement, including physical barriers, advanced surveillance, and increased patrols along the US-Mexico border. When you build a wall, they dig underneath it. It's that simple, that logical from their perspective. On the other hand, detection technologies have dramatically improved, with ground-penetrating radar, seismic sensors, and even specially trained K9 units that can detect subterranean anomalies, all contributing to more frequent discoveries. The year began with a bang, or more accurately, a hollow thud beneath the streets. On January 8th in El Paso, Texas, Homeland Security investigations agents working alongside US Border Patrol and Mexican counterparts unearthed a major cross-border tunnel extending from Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, into a storm drain on Boone Street in South El Paso. This wasn't some amateur operation. The passage measured roughly 4 feet wide by 6 feet high, spacious enough for a person to walk upright, and was reinforced with 2x4 wooden beams. It featured a robust ventilation system and electrical wiring for sustained operations, suggesting it had been constructed within the prior year and was nearly ready for operation. Here's what makes that El Paso discovery particularly significant. No, drugs were seized at the site. The tunnel was intercepted before it could be fully utilized, which means it disrupted potential flows estimated at hundreds of kilograms of fentanyl monthly. That's prevention, not just reaction, and that's a major win in the endless chess match between law enforcement and cartels. Just 2 days later, on January 10th, the pattern continued. Border Patrol's Tucson sector detected a man-made tunnel breaching a storm drain in Nogales, Arizona, the 22nd such find in that region over just 3 years. This one was shorter and less sophisticated than its El Paso counterpart, lacking rails but featuring basic shoring, and the 100-foot passage was tied to human and drug smuggling by unspecified transnational criminal organizations. While no seizures occurred at the tunnel itself, the bust coincided with a multi-agency sweep that yielded 500 kilograms of methamphetamine valued at $2.5 million. The public reaction to these discoveries was immediate and visceral. Social media exploded with videos and commentary.
Beneath an ordinary vape shop in Laredo, Texas, federal agents found a 25-foot tunnel that was used to smuggle drugs from Mexico into the US. We've heard about these tunnels before, but let's get into it. What is happening? 25 feet deep, insane. There's tunnels all over these border towns leading from Mexico into the US.
A user on X known as QueensRide24 cataloged these discoveries as part of a 2025 edition of Cartel Evasions, with the thread amassing 76 views and sparking replies demanding underground walls, now that what some had dismissed as conspiracy theories were being validated by legacy media. Similarly, Erarticom's video of the Juarez El Paso tunnel, showing agents in hard hats descending into the void, racked up 549 likes and 166 reposts, with comments echoing widespread frustration over porous borders, despite billions spent on security. But January was just the beginning of a year that would continue to expose the vast underground infrastructure supporting one of the world's most lucrative criminal enterprises. Follow the money. Now, let's talk about something that often gets overlooked in discussions about drug cartels and border security: the money. Because at the end of the day, these elaborate tunnel systems, these sophisticated smuggling operations, these aren't being built for the thrill of it. They're being built to move an absolutely staggering amount of cash. And in 2025, we're seeing law enforcement agencies finally start to crack down on the financial networks that make all of this possible. Here's the reality that most people don't fully grasp. Mexican transnational criminal organizations generate an estimated $20 to $50 billion annually from US drug sales alone. That's billion with a B, more than the GDP of some small countries. We're talking about fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, and heroin, with a substantial portion of these profits being laundered through sophisticated networks involving Chinese underground banking, cryptocurrency, and front businesses like vape shops or real estate ventures. Now, you might be thinking about that headline, the one that caught your attention and brought you here, but I need to be completely transparent with you here. While that That figure has been circulating in some discussions and represents the theoretical scale of money moving through these operations. The actual cash seizures documented in 2025 tell a different, though still significant story. Nationwide, over $150 million in cash and assets linked to cartels was seized in 2025, with individual operations netting amounts ranging from $320,000 to $11 million. Let me break down some of the most significant cash seizure operations of 2025, because each one tells a fascinating story about how these financial networks operate and how law enforcement is finally starting to dismantle them piece by piece. On May 6, 2025, federal agents executed a landmark operation targeting fentanyl distribution networks across California, Texas, and Arizona that yielded a record 396 kilograms of fentanyl pills and powder, alongside $610,000 in cash. This wasn't just a random bust. This operation disrupted a Sinaloa CJNG joint venture funneling proceeds through Los Angeles stash houses. The operation resulted in 16 arrests, with suspects linked to mid-level distribution cells, and the cash was found in duffel bags hidden in vehicle compartments, destined for Mexico via bulk smuggling routes. What's particularly striking about this operation is the sheer value involved. According to Department of Justice statements, the fentanyl's street value exceeded $12 million, which means that $600,000 in cash was just a fraction of the revenue this network was generating. That's the thing about these operations. What law enforcement seizes often represents only a small percentage of what's actually flowing through the system. Then, on June 20th, we saw another significant interdiction. At the Laredo, Texas port of entry, a corridor dominated by the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, Customs and Border Protection, officers intercepted $815,000 in bulk cash concealed in a southbound vehicle's hidden compartments. This seizure was particularly interesting because it highlighted something crucial. The cash, wrapped in vacuum-sealed bundles, was intended for repatriation to Mexico, a common tactic to evade banking scrutiny. What makes Laredo so significant? Border Report noted that Laredo's cash seizures in 2025 alone hit $18 million, representing a 15% increase from 2024, driven by enhanced X-ray scanning and K9 units specifically trained to detect bulk cash. This tells us that while cartels continue trying to move money south, law enforcement is getting increasingly sophisticated at catching them in the act. But perhaps the most revealing operation came in late August. The DEA's Sinaloa Surge, a nationwide operation running from August 25th to 29th, targeted Sinaloa cartel distribution networks across 23 states, resulting in 617 arrests, $11 million in cash, and $1.7 million in assets, including vehicles and properties. This wasn't just impressive for its scope, spanning nearly half the country, but for what it revealed about the infrastructure supporting these operations. The cash was recovered from urban stash houses and rural drop points, with significant hauls in California totaling $3 million and Texas yielding $2.5 million. But here's what should really concern us. DEA Administrator Ann Milgram emphasized the role of Chinese money laundering organizations, which facilitated $312 billion in illicit transfers over 4 years for Sinaloa's fentanyl trade. $312 billion with a B over just 4 years. That's not a typo. That number is so large it's almost incomprehensible, representing more money than the annual budgets of most American states. The public reaction to these revelations was swift and alarmed. On X, a post from Our Holon Above highlighting the $312 billion figure garnered 616 likes and 200 reposts, with users decrying cartel banks operating unchecked and calling for sanctions on complicit foreign entities. But wait, there's more to this money laundering story, and it gets even more creative and concerning. In September 2025, the DEA launched something called Operation Vape Trail, a nationwide crackdown on the Jalisco New Generation Cartel's use of vape shops as money laundering fronts. This operation seized an estimated $2 million in cash, 2.3 million vape devices laced with fentanyl or methamphetamine, and 100 weapons across multiple states. Here's what makes this operation particularly insidious. The operation exposed how CJNG franchises embedded drug proceeds into retail sales, exploiting lax vape regulations. Think about that for a moment. Teenagers walking into what they think is a legitimate vape shop, buying what they think is a legal product, unknowingly supporting one of the most violent criminal organizations in the world. 13 arrests targeted shop owners and distributors, with cash found in hidden safes and bank accounts traced to Chinese intermediaries. And this brings us back to that tunnel in Laredo we mentioned earlier.
So, in Laredo, Texas, there was this vape shop case, okay? So it was a DEA operation targeting THC-laced vapes being sold in shops across Texas border towns. And it just so happened that they come across one vape shop that had a tunnel inside that was 25 feet deep.
The tunnel discovered beneath Gilberto Pena's vape shop in Laredo was 25 feet deep and, while unfinished, was clearly intended for smuggling. Pena was charged with possession of a controlled substance, and cocaine and marijuana were seized during the enforcement sweep. But here's the crucial connection. This wasn't just about selling drugs out of a vape shop, this was about using a legitimate-looking business as cover for a sophisticated smuggling operation that included an underground tunnel.
Now, 22 shops were inspected in this operation. 2 arrests were made, but the tunnel raised the stakes because this went beyond street-level drug sales to full-blown trafficking and smuggling.
This is the new face of cartel operations, blending legitimate business with illegal smuggling infrastructure, making it increasingly difficult for law enforcement to distinguish between the two. A Texas Senate bill in 2024 had outlawed THC vape pens, which is what prompted this operation in the first place. But what they uncovered was far more extensive than simple retail drug sales. Now let's talk about how this money actually moves, because the methods are both sophisticated and constantly evolving. Beyond bulk cash smuggling, where couriers physically transport currency across borders, risking interception at checkpoints, cartels employ trade-based laundering, funneling proceeds through imports like clothing or electronics, and digital platforms, including cryptocurrency exchanges with minimal oversight. The DEA's National Drug Threat Assessment notes that Chinese money laundering organizations, leveraging informal hawala systems, move up to $50 million monthly for the Sinaloa cartel and CJNG, often through US-based couriers or wire services like Western Union. This hawala system is particularly difficult to track because it operates outside traditional banking systems, relying instead on trust relationships and informal networks that span continents. But here's the sobering truth. Only 10 to 15% of laundered funds are intercepted annually, according to DEA estimates, due to understaffed financial crime units and legal barriers to seizing foreign accounts. That means that for every dollar seized in operations like those I've described, somewhere between $7 and $9 successfully makes it through the system. The $18 million in border cash seizures at El Paso, as tracked by the El Paso Intelligence Center, pales against the $312 billion laundered over 4 years, highlighting just how vast the scale gap truly is. The evolution and response. At this point, you might be wondering, how did we get here? How did Mexican drug cartels become so sophisticated, so well-funded, so seemingly unstoppable that they're building underground networks beneath American cities and moving hundreds of billions of dollars through international financial systems? The answer lies in understanding the evolution of these organizations and how they've adapted to every countermeasure thrown at them.
I've said this time and time again, and my future reporting will also show this. As this southern border has been cracked down on, cartels have been and continue to adapt at an insane rate. Honestly, we know that they do this. We know that if meth is cracked down on, they shift to coke. If fentanyl is cracked down on, they shift to meth. If drugs are cracked down on, they shift to humans. If humans are cracked down on, they shift to infants. These guys adapt.
This adaptation isn't just reactive, it's strategic, calculated, and frighteningly effective. According to the Mexico Peace Index 2025, organized crime remains a core feature of Mexico's security landscape, with cartels controlling vast territories and operating what are essentially franchise-like business models. Think about that for a moment. These aren't just criminal gangs anymore. They're operating like multinational corporations with distributed networks, diversified revenue streams, and sophisticated management structures. The shift to decentralized franchise models is particularly revealing. Historically, cartels like the Sinaloa operated as monolithic entities under charismatic leaders like Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, but by 2024-2025, they've fragmented into networked franchises, local cells, or alliances that operate semi-autonomously under a brand name, paying royalties or sharing profits with core leadership. Over 74 armed groups are now affiliated with 6 major cartels, creating a web of criminal activity that's incredibly difficult to disrupt. This decentralization allows for rapid adaptation. When one cell is taken down, others continue operating. When one smuggling route is compromised, franchises in other locations simply adjust their operations. It's resilience through distribution, and it's proving remarkably effective against traditional law enforcement approaches that target hierarchical organizations. But the evolution doesn't stop with organizational structure. The technological innovations these organizations have adopted are genuinely impressive and deeply concerning. Cartels now now use drones, including FPV, first-person view models, for reconnaissance and even attacks, with some organizations deploying drone swarms in territorial conflicts. We're talking about military-grade technology, with some cartel members having received training from Ukrainian conflict veterans, bringing battlefield tactics and equipment back to the streets of Mexico and the borderlands. In smuggling operations specifically, cartels use camouflage scouts in border foliage and military drones for spotting, with some operations captured in Texas footage showing Rio Grande Valley smugglers charging up to $18,000 per migrant crossing. That's not just adaptation, that's innovation, applying cutting-edge technology to age-old criminal enterprises. And here's something that should really concern us. Cartels have shifted their fentanyl production model, increasingly importing precursor chemicals from China via shipping containers and assembling labs inside the United States to reduce border risks. This isn't just about smuggling finished products anymore, they're establishing production capacity within our borders, fundamentally changing the challenge law enforcement faces.
Here's the thing, these tunnels require an immense amount of financing, engineers, safe houses, and US side partners, just like this vape shop owner. He is one of them. It's a perfect example. I want to talk about the sort of infrastructure and architecture of these tunnels because they are very advanced. They're not going to randomly collapse on you as these people or drugs are being smuggled through them. There's not going to be a lack of oxygen or something really going wrong because you can't lose the product or the person delivering the product. You lose money.
This brings us to a crucial point that often gets overlooked, the American connection.
Without the American component, and I say this time and time again, this theme seems to come up over and over again in every dispatch almost. There was always an American counterpart who is either funding, colluding, or allowing this to go on.
Architecture and engineering students at major universities across Mexico are reportedly being recruited, sometimes paid, sometimes coerced, to create the plans and build the infrastructure necessary for these state-of-the-art tunnels. We're not talking about amateurs with shovels here. These are professionals, trained experts who understand structural engineering, ventilation systems, and subsurface construction. The tunnels can't afford to collapse on smugglers or shipments. It would mean lost revenue, lost product, and potentially lost lives that the organization depends on. So how is the United States responding to this evolved, sophisticated threat? The answer is complex, multifaceted, and frankly still evolving as law enforcement and policymakers grapple with organizations that operate more like insurgent forces than traditional criminal gangs. In February 2025, the Trump administration took a dramatic step, designating the Sinaloa Cartel and Jalisco New Generation Cartel as foreign terrorist organizations. This wasn't just symbolic, it fundamentally changed the legal framework for pursuing these organizations, enabling Treasury sanctions on cartel assets, blocking over $500 million in funds, and designating over 150 individuals and entities.
Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities.
This FTO designation opened new avenues for enforcement, but it also created tensions with Mexico, whose President Claudia Sheinbaum emphasized Mexico's focus on social control over drug elimination and rejected any subordination to U.S. policies. This tension has complicated what should be a collaborative binational effort, with Mexico viewing the designation as potentially justifying U.S. interference in their sovereignty. On the operational front, the DEA has been aggressive. The bold bilateral initiative launched on August 18, 2025, aimed at disrupting cartel gatekeepers who facilitate cross-border drug flows, leveraging intelligence sharing with Mexican counterparts despite the diplomatic tensions. This built on the long-standing Merida initiative, which was updated in 2025 to include counter-terrorism sanctions enabled by the FTO designations. And the results? They're significant, even if they represent just a fraction of the overall problem. In 2025 alone, over 1,200 cartel-linked crime-linked arrests have been made, with seizures exceeding 1 million pounds of drugs, including over 1 million kilograms of fentanyl nationwide and over $150 million in cash and assets frozen. These represent a 25% increase in prosecutions compared to previous years, according to the Department of Justice. But perhaps the most revealing aspect of the government's response comes from the technology and methods being deployed. Detection of tunnels has improved dramatically through ground-penetrating radar and seismic sensors, contributing to a 20% year-over-year increase in tunnel discoveries. K9 units specialized in fentanyl detection have been expanded, contributing to record seizures at ports like Otay Mesa, and drones and satellite imagery now support real-time surveillance of border regions. The war on drugs, the battle against cartels, the fight to secure our borders, whatever you want to call it, isn't a war that will be won with a single operation, a single policy, or even a single presidential administration. It's a long-term challenge that will require sustained effort, international cooperation, technological innovation, and perhaps most importantly, honest acknowledgement of both our successes and our limitations. As we move forward into 2026 and beyond, the question isn't whether cartels will continue adapting. They will. The question is whether our response will evolve quickly enough, comprehensively enough, and effectively enough to stay ahead of organizations that have proven themselves masters of adaptation and innovation. One thing is certain: beneath our feet, in the financial systems that surround us, and in communities throughout America, this conflict continues, and understanding it, really understanding the scope, the sophistication, and the challenges involved, is the first step toward developing effective responses. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.